Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. If you're new here, we basically take a whole bunch of sources you give us and dive really deep into them to find the really cool, fascinating things that you might not have time to discover yourself.
Yeah.
Today we're diving into Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929.
Oh, wow.
We're going to stick to the facts, and try to give you all a real understanding of what happened on that day that really, it changed the world.
It really did, yeah. It's such a pivotal moment in history.
It is.
And, even though it happened almost a century ago now,
Right.
the echoes of that day are still felt today. We can definitely see it.
Oh, absolutely. To really understand the magnitude of what happened, we need a little context.
Sure.
Can you paint us a quick picture of what the economic landscape looked like leading up to the crash? Like, how did we get there?
Yeah, so the Roaring Twenties, right? That's what they called the years before the crash. Stock prices were soaring. There was this feeling of prosperity, and a lot of people thought the good times would just, keep rolling, keep going.
Yeah.
But as we know, there were some serious weaknesses simmering beneath the surface.
Right. Like a party where everyone's ignoring the fact that the music's about to stop.
Exactly. Yeah, and the punch bowl's running dry.
Yeah, exactly.
The lights are flickering. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the day that the music did actually stop. Black Tuesday.
Right.
16 million shares were traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
It's hard to fathom.
Yeah. Can you even put that into perspective for us? Like, what does that actually mean?
So it was utter chaos that day. To give you an idea, that was several times the normal daily volume. So the ticker tape, which printed stock prices, literally could not keep up.
Wow.
It was running hours behind, which just added to the confusion and the panic.
Oh my gosh.
So imagine trying to sell your stocks, but not knowing what they're actually worth because the information is so delayed.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It really is.
That's terrifying. And it wasn't just a dip in the market. This was a full-on plunge.
Right.
And some stocks, they didn't even have buyers at any price.
Exactly.
Like, how does that even happen?
It's mind-boggling. Think about that. You are desperate to sell, willing to take any price,
Right.
but there are simply no takers. That's how deep the panic ran.
Yeah.
People saw their life savings, their dreams literally evaporating before their eyes.
It's hard to even fathom that level of fear and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Beyond the numbers, what was the human impact of the crash? Can you tell us about some of the people caught in this financial whirlwind? What were their stories?
Well, there are countless stories of people who were just financially devastated. Businessmen jumping from windows, families losing their homes. The ripple effect of the crash went far beyond Wall Street. One particularly striking story involves William C. Durant, the founder of General Motors.
Like, wasn't he was one of the financial giants at the time, right?
He was.
Yeah.
He was a titan of industry. Durant, along with members of the Rockefeller family, actually tried to buy up massive amounts of stock to try and stop the bleeding.
Wow.
They poured millions into the market, hoping to stabilize it.
It was an audacious, almost defiant act.
It really was.
But it was like trying to plug a dam with a single finger.
A very expensive finger.
Yeah, an expensive finger.
Their efforts were ultimately futile.
Yeah.
The forces at play were just too powerful. The market continued its downward spiral, and the world just watched in disbelief as a decade of prosperity came crashing down.
Just unbelievable.
Yeah, it really highlights the sheer scale of the crisis, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even these titans of industry with their vast fortunes, they couldn't stem the tide.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that when an entire system starts to unravel, individual actions,
All right.
no matter how bold or well-intentioned, can sometimes just feel insignificant. So the market crashes. Fortunes are lost. What were the immediate consequences
Yeah.
beyond Wall Street?
So the immediate aftermath was like a series of dominoes falling.
Okay.
Banks heavily invested in the stock market began to fail.
Oh, wow.
As panicked depositors rushed to withdraw their savings,
Right.
businesses large and small shut down as consumer spending just dried up practically overnight.
Wow.
Unemployment soared, leaving millions jobless and desperate.
So it wasn't just about lost fortunes. It was about lost livelihoods.
Exactly.
Entire lives were upended.
Absolutely. And the psychological blow was just as devastating.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where you believe in progress, prosperity, the American dream, and then suddenly the rug is pulled out from under you.
Yeah.
It shook people's faith in the system and the future itself.
Wow. It makes you wonder, how did people react? Was there a sense of what was to come, or was it just total shock?
I think there was a mix of disbelief, anger, and a desperate hope that things would quickly turn around. But the reality was this was just the beginning.
Oh, gosh.
The crash of 1929 wasn't just a blip on the radar, it was the starting point of what we now know as the Great Depression, a global economic crisis that would last for a decade.
A decade. It's hard to even grasp the length of that suffering.
Yeah.
And you mentioned global, that this wasn't just an American problem, was it?
Not at all. The effects were felt worldwide.
Wow.
The American economy was the engine of global growth at the time.
Right.
So when it sputtered, the whole world felt the shockwaves.
Makes sense.
International trade, which had been booming, plummeted. Think about it. A staggering 66% drop
Wow.
in international trade between 1929 and 1934.
That's a mind-blowing figure. What drove such a massive decline? Was it simply a lack of demand?
That was certainly a factor with economies struggling. People simply couldn't afford to buy as many goods. But there's another, perhaps more interesting piece to this, protectionist policies.
Okay.
Many countries desperate to protect their own industries raised tariffs on imported goods.
So trying to build walls to protect themselves.
Precisely, they thought it would help their domestic industries.
Right.
But instead, these tariffs actually backfired.
Oh, wow.
They made goods more expensive, further dampening demand and hindering global trade even more.
It's a classic example of unintended consequences.
It really is.
It makes you think about how interconnected the world really was even back then.
It highlights a crucial point. The global economy is a complex, interwoven tapestry.
Yeah.
Pulling on one thread can unravel the entire fabric, and this interconnectedness wasn't limited to trade. The crash exposed vulnerabilities in another pillar of the global financial system, the gold standard.
Right. The gold standard for those of us who might not be economists, can you give us a quick explanation of what that was and how it was impacted by the crash?
Sure, in simple terms, the gold standard was a system where countries tied their currencies to a fixed amount of gold. It was supposed to provide stability and facilitate international trade, but the crash put immense pressure on this system as economies crumbled. Countries faced a dilemma: maintain the gold standard or try to stabilize their economies through other means.
So a choice between sticking to the rules and trying to save themselves.
A difficult choice indeed, and many countries ultimately were forced to abandon the gold standard, leading to currency devaluations and further instability in the global financial system.
So the crash exposed the flaws in a system that was supposed to be the bedrock of global finance.
Yeah.
What a mess. It's like watching a carefully constructed house of cards collapse under the slightest breeze.
That's a great analogy. And from the wreckage of that collapse, a new idea began to take shape: the turmoil of the 1930s, the failures of the gold standard, the desperate need for international cooperation. All of these factors eventually laid the groundwork for a new system, the Bretton Woods system.
Bretton Woods, that rings a bell. But refresh my memory. What was it and how did it come about?
So, in the midst of World War II, representatives from 44 allied nations gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to essentially rethink the global financial system. The goal is to create a more stable and predictable order, one that could prevent another Great Depression.
Okay.
They created a system of fixed exchange rates pegged to the US dollar, which itself was backed by gold.
Got it.
This system helped facilitate international trade and investment, contributing to a period of unprecedented global economic growth after the war.
So in a way, the chaos of the Great Depression gave birth to a system that aimed to prevent future chaos.
Right.
It's fascinating how crisis can sometimes lead to innovation.
Indeed. And it wasn't just in the realm of finance that we saw this shift. The crash and the ensuing Great Depression forced governments around the world to reconsider their roles in managing their economies. The prevailing laissez-faire approach, the idea that government should stay out of the market, came under intense scrutiny.
It seems like the sheer scale of the crisis forced people to reevaluate long-held beliefs about how the world worked.
Precisely, governments began to experiment with more interventionist policies, seeking to actively manage their economies and provide relief to those suffering.
Okay.
This marked a significant turning point in economic thinking, paving the way for the development of modern macroeconomic theory and policy.
So amidst the hardship and the devastation, there was a glimmer of hope, a rethinking of how to manage economies, a new framework for global cooperation.
It was a dark time, no doubt, but it also forced a reevaluation of priorities, a questioning of assumptions, and ultimately a search for new solutions.
And that's why understanding history is so important, isn't it? It's not just about dates and events. It's about understanding the forces that shape our world, the choices we make, and the lessons we learn, both good and bad.
Exactly. History gives us context, perspective, and a deeper understanding of the challenges we face today. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, human ingenuity and resilience can pave the way for a brighter future.
It's incredibly insightful. It makes you wonder, Could something like Black Tuesday happen today? What have we learned, or maybe even not learned, from this historical turning point?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one we'll explore further when we return.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before, well, I guess not really a break since this is a podcast, but before we moved on, we were talking about whether something like Black Tuesday could happen in our modern world.
Yeah.
It's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is. But it's also a question I think worth grappling with.
Right.
After all, understanding the past is key to navigating the future, right?
Absolutely. So let's dive into that unsettling thought.
Okay.
Could it happen again? What would a modern-day Black Tuesday even look like?
Well, it's a hypothetical, of course.
Yeah.
But if we look at the underlying factors that contributed to the 1929 crash,
Yeah.
we can see some potential parallels to our current economic landscape.
Okay, like what?
For one, we've seen periods of rapid growth and speculation in recent decades,
Right.
particularly in the tech sector. The dot-com bubble of the late 90s
Oh, yeah.
and the more recent surge in cryptocurrency values.
Yeah.
Those come to mind.
So those irrational exuberance moments.
Exactly.
We've definitely seen those.
Yeah.
But we also have more regulations in place now, right?
Right.
Things like the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Mhm.
They're designed to prevent the kind of reckless speculation that fueled the 1929 crash.
That's true. We've learned some hard lessons from history and we've built safeguards into the system.
Yeah.
But regulations can only go so far. Human psychology, right, driven by fear and greed, that's a powerful force.
Right.
And it can find ways to circumvent even the most well-intentioned rules.
Yeah. It's like that saying, no matter how high you build the fence, someone will always find a way to climb over it.
Exactly.
So are you saying we're just as vulnerable today as we were back then?
I wouldn't say we're just as vulnerable.
Okay.
We have more tools at our disposal to manage economic crises, and we have a better understanding of how markets work.
Right.
But the potential for a major disruption, a black swan event that shakes the foundations of the global financial system, that potential is always there.
Okay, so maybe not a carbon copy of 1929,
Right.
but something equally disruptive potentially.
Possibly. Yeah.
What about the role of technology in all this? Would the speed of information and trading today make things better or worse in a crisis?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
The speed at which information travels today is unprecedented. News, rumors, even panic can spread like wildfire
Right.
through social media and online platforms.
Wow.
So it's easy to imagine a scenario where a negative event triggers a cascade of selling,
Yeah.
as investors react instantaneously, potentially amplifying market volatility.
So technology could actually accelerate a downturn.
It could.
It's almost like the market's nervous system is wired to react at warp speed.
Exactly. But technology is a double-edged sword.
Oh, okay.
It can also facilitate faster and more effective intervention by regulators and central banks. They have access to real-time data and sophisticated analytical tools that could enable them to respond to a crisis more quickly and precisely.
So faster reactions on all sides, potentially.
Right.
It's like a high-stakes game of financial speed chess.
Exactly.
What about the psychological impact? You mentioned fear and greed earlier.
Right.
Do you think social media could amplify those emotions in a crisis?
It's certainly a possibility. Social media can be an echo chamber
Yeah.
where fear and uncertainty can be magnified, leading to irrational decision-making.
Yeah.
Imagine a scenario where a market downturn starts trending on Twitter,
Right.
and suddenly everyone's scrambling to sell, regardless of the underlying fundamentals.
Oh, it's like a digital bank run fueled by fear and FOMO.
Precisely. But social media could also play a positive role.
Okay.
It could be a powerful tool for disseminating accurate information,
Right.
countering rumors and misinformation, and potentially helping to restore calm and confidence.
So technology is a wild card. It could make things better, or it could make things a whole lot worse.
It's hard to say.
What about the global implications? We talked earlier about how interconnected the world was even back in 1929.
Right.
A crash today, would it be even more interconnected, more far-reaching?
Without a doubt, the global economy is far more integrated today than it was in the past.
Right.
Financial markets are interconnected, supply chains are global, and capital flows across borders instantaneously.
Yeah.
A crash in one major market would inevitably have ripple effects across the globe,
Right.
impacting trade, investment, and currencies. It wouldn't be just an American problem or a European problem, it would be a global problem.
That's a sobering thought. So let's say the unthinkable happens.
Right.
A major crash occurs.
Yeah.
What have we learned from history that could help us navigate the fallout? What are the key takeaways from Black Tuesday that might help us today?
Well, one of the most important lessons from the Great Depression is the importance of swift and decisive government action. The initial response to the 1929 crash was hesitant and piecemeal,
Yeah.
and it arguably prolonged the economic suffering. Today, we have a better understanding of the tools available to governments to stimulate the economy and provide relief.
So proactive intervention rather than waiting to see if things sort themselves out.
Exactly. Monetary policy, fiscal policy, even direct aid to struggling individuals and businesses. These are all tools that can be deployed to mitigate the impact of a crisis.
So the government has a role to play, but what about individual investors?
Right.
What lessons can we learn from the mistakes of those who lost everything in 1929? What should we be doing to prepare ourselves for potential turbulence in the markets?
Well, diversification is crucial.
Yeah.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. A well-diversified portfolio can help cushion the blow of a market downturn. And just as important, if not more so, avoid panic selling.
Right.
Remember, markets go up, markets go down. It's the nature of the beast.
It is.
Having a long-term investment strategy and sticking to it, even when things get rough, can help you weather the storm.
So don't check your portfolio every 5 minutes and freak out over every little dip.
Exactly.
Easier said than done, I'm sure.
It is. It is. Fear is a powerful motivator, but it can also be a terrible investment advisor.
Right.
Remember, the key to long-term success in the markets is patience and discipline.
Those are great points. It seems like learning from history, both its successes and its failures,
Right.
is essential both for policymakers and individual investors.
Absolutely. Understanding the factors that led to past crises, both the economic and the human elements, can help us make more informed decisions and build a more resilient financial system. The more we learn from the past, the better equipped we are to face the challenges of the future.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored Black Tuesday, its causes, its consequences, its global impact, and even its potential relevance to our modern world. It's been a deep dive in the truest sense of the word.
It has.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think Black Tuesday serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of economic systems and the importance of constant vigilance. While we've made progress in terms of regulation, understanding economic cycles, and developing tools to manage crises, the potential for disruption is always there. Learning from history, both its successes and its failures, is the best way to prepare ourselves for whatever the future holds.
Wise words. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Black Tuesday. We hope you gained some valuable insights and perhaps even a renewed appreciation for the complexities and the interconnectedness of the financial world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.